To be Barry. And Barry's going to go into it, but the budget is just going to be a challenge because we do not know what the grant's going to be. And we were expecting to get the notice at the end of this week, and it's 3 weeks, Barry, is now?
That's what they're saying. That's what APGA said.
No, 3 weeks. We were expecting this before elections, and now it's going to be another month or six. So we'll find out in March.
They were talking finding out before Thanksgiving. And as the story goes, PHMSA has completed their recommendations, but it has to go over a lot of people's desks in the federal government, a lot of other agencies. That's the story we're going to give them. So, okay, good afternoon, Barry Ellison, and as Chris said, we're going to talk about the fiscal year 24 budget drivers for the gas department. Just as a brief overview, the gas department consists of 4 groups: the underground construction group with 14 employees, field service group, which has 7, our gas measurement and control, otherwise known as our gas mechanics, at 2 full-time people, and engineering compliance and training has 2, and I include myself in that group as well, for a total of 25, including myself. What these people do is we perform the operations, maintenance, and capital improvements for 155 miles of natural gas mains, roughly 7,400 gas services, 5 city gate stations, 9 district regulator stations, the LNG facility in the industrial park, and 2 CNG fueling stations. When we look at next year's proposed budget, when we add all the labor accounts and all the O&M accounts together, we're looking at a modest increase of 1.8%. It's roughly 1.56 million versus 1.53. However, on the capital side, there's a rather significant increase of almost 74%, and we'll get into the reasons for that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Does that increase include or not include the PGA?
What do you think, Laura?
So, well, this is outside of the cost of
Yeah.
gas. So
Okay.
we're talking about staffing and capital
Okay.
investment
Yep.
on this side
Yeah,
of things.
that's what I thought. I just
Yep.
wanted to. Sure.
So next slide. Okay, so on the capital side, we compare budgets for year over year. So a couple expenses we didn't have last year that we had this year. Number one, we're proposing to rebuild the regulator station here in this facility at a cost of just over $300,000. And we have a heater replacement at our Norristown gate station, which is about $150,000. Other drivers of that capital is our contracting expenses for mains and services have really escalated rapidly over the last 3 years, sort of consistent with the rate of inflation and some other things that we've seen in multiple industries. So some contracts that we hire out include paving. We do have an underground construction crew and outside crew to help us achieve our DIP goals. We have a header and a house piping crew, which is Nutmeg Construction here in Norwich. We have a concrete repair crew, Prime Electric again here in Norwich. We have inspection services, flagging, and landscaping. A couple of these contracted services recently were rebid in the last couple of years, and the unit costs are, in some cases, double from what we've just seen a couple of years ago. And when we renew the remaining bids each year, typically we get a 3% increase, but again, with the cost of labor, fuel, and everything that rolls into inflation, we're seeing contractors requesting up to 10% for these annual renewals. You put that all together, you're looking at about a $500,000 increase on our contracted service costs. Our construction seasons have been impacted by supply chain. So in the last couple of years, we've done more mains. We've been skewed heavier to mains because there's so many parts involved with doing a gas service that we just haven't been able to get those parts in. Now, services typically cost more than mains. So we're playing a little bit of catch up in this current construction season we just finished and next year's. which is also driving the price of our capital. Whenever we replace a service, typically costs more than what you can do in a day for a main. So you add all those together and look at about a $900,000 increase in our capital expenditure from FY '23 to '24. So we want to go on to that. So how can we mitigate the plan? Chris was just talking about the grant. So we thought the grant was going to be we thought we'd hear some feedback on the grant this week, and we start really being able to make some hard plans going forward. Well, we just found out from our contacts at APGA at about 11 a.m. this morning that PHMSA needs those. So, again, we hurry up and wait. We've applied for, as this group has heard a number of times, for $22 million to replace all the remaining cast iron in our system, about 8.3 miles, and the associated services with that. It's a 100% grant, doesn't require any additional funding from us, other than maybe some manpower to administer the multiple contracted crews that we're going to inevitably have to accomplish this work in a short time frame we're looking at. We thought PHMSA was required to notify us by this week. No, that's now been adjusted. We do expect to receive award. Of course, there's no guarantee. We applied for 5 years worth of funding to take care of all of our 8.3 miles. I have nothing to base this on other than a feeling from what I've heard from APGA meetings. I suspect we're going to get 2 years worth of funding, and then they're going to ask us probably to apply for the years 3 through 5 in the next round of applications. That's just a guess. That's still good news for us because that, that would take a significant portion of what we allocate every year to capital to replace our maintenance services and potentially just put all that load on the grant. So, typically that's about $2.3 million when you talk about everything that we gather through our rates, and that could really reduce that going forward for the next 2 to 5 years. Just a brief overview of the project we have proposed. This is a picture of the regulator station that's here in the yard. That's like a particle moisture separator from the days, as I understand, back when we were doing propane. This particular station doesn't look like much of a station. It's outdoor, which is another concern. We typically put these stations either in a building or a mall now. But it does, it's an important station that it feeds the downtown Greenville low pressure systems. And that's always your most vulnerable in the coldest days of the year. You got to have resiliency and dependability in your low pressure. Again, look at a cost about $310,000. Next project we talked about was the heater at Norrichtown. This is a picture of it. You don't really have the scale. This is that heater is about 12 feet long and probably stands about 4 feet tall. It's a significant piece of equipment, and it's required to ensure that the gas we send out is at an acceptable temperature where your regulators won't freeze and some other things won't freeze, which can inevitably lead to an overpressure protection. This particular heater was commissioned in 2004, which is right in line with what you'd expect the life cycle to be in about 20 years. That's an estimated cost of $150,000. And lastly, our renewal projects. Again, in coordination with DPW and the Connecticut DOT, several services on the east side of the Plymouth Street extension area, significant main and service renewals at the Allen and Perry Ave over the Thamesville section by Falvey's. And Route 97, the DOT is going to be repaving a section from about Dairy Queen to the Panema Mill area. And we have several services out there that need to be reviewed ahead of that, but not when we consider our state-of-the-art services. That's a snapshot of what this year's construction season looks like. Realize fiscal year 24 includes some of next calendar year's projects. Those will be determined going forward with more coordination between CONDOT, DPW, and we see where we land on the grant. So that's it for that one.
Quick question about the Route 97 work. Who knows what's going to happen, but there's talk about Business Park North. Will that in any way sort of accommodate greater demand potentially, or?
No, and the route isn't really affected either. We'd be coming down the Hunters area to Providence Street, so they would end just short.
Okay,
So I don't expect there to be any impact there.
okay,
They can always change their limits though.
sure.
For what we understand now.
But we are working with Advanced DT as another potential source above and beyond the raise grants and the, and the other city, state of Connecticut grants.
Yes.
So, it's the third potential revenue source to do the, business park or gas, so.
Can we pick up any of the, stuff the contractors do in-house or no?
So they're capable of doing the work, it just becomes you do a lot less of it. And that's ultimately the key. So before the grant, Connecticut Pure has this kind of expectation that you're gonna get rid of cast iron mains in a sort of reasonable amount of time, which is, now it's under 10 years. So if we don't get the grant and we still have to replace 8.3 miles in under 10 years, our current construction crews don't have that capability. We won't be able to do that in that time frame. We can do the work, just not in the time frame.
25 years ago, Bill, we did all the work in-house. And what we found was our guys are very good at gas pipe. And if we could offset some of those other tasks, sidewalks and the pavement, then we could get a lot more done. And that was, we kind of went out. If it tends to become, much more expensive, but I don't think it's the labor as much as the asphalt and, the labor is something, but we still, our gas pipe fitters are typically more skilled than a paving crew for wages, so. But if it becomes a problem, we can't get service, we are capable.
What are the cast iron mains replaced by?
Almost 100% of the time plastic, unless we're talking about just highly elevated pressures, then steel comes into play. So, almost exclusively plastic.
Chris and Larry are off to meet the bull.
Oh, good.
Now, I assume this may just be fantasy for the future, but, will the new gas mains accommodate hydrogen if there's ever a changeover?
Will it accommodate what?
Hydrogen?
Oh, so I think the jury's still out on that. There's a lot of studies going on right now on the effect of hydrogen on high density polyethylene and medium density. A lot of gas companies go with a lower quality pipe than we do. And there could be an impact there. So the jury's still out.
And when you put it in seal, there is, hydrogen stress cracking that can occur. So, it's not a given, and it's relatively new. There's not a lot of hydrogen pipelines around.
Yeah.
The industry's putting a lot of money into it right now, just to see what the impacts will be. I mean, they got potentially meter impacts, density change on the gas passing through the meter. How does that affect?
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other further questions for Barry, next item is electric budget guidance.
And we're gonna say the same thing. We're applying for grants. We don't know the outcome of the grants. So there's a little, up in the air, and it won't probably be resolved on the electric side, at least until after our budget is put together. Barry's got a chance to change the budget. Eric, not so much.
So we can wait and see what happens with the grants to make those decisions.
Yeah, so, yeah, and when we get to the end, we won't, especially when you'll see in Eric's, presentation, supply chains hitting Eric even worse than Barry. It's hitting both significant. But, transformers are a nationwide problem. And when the transformers we ordered a year ago come in, impacts this budget, because there's no guarantee the ones that were promised in January will be here in June or July.
Is it getting any better?
No.
Any of the stuff? No.
No, unfortunately, we're actually seeing it get worse, believe it or not, which was not expected.
Yeah, so we may, when it comes to, we're not gonna say, hey, we're not gonna take transformers when they come, because we're actually, at the point where if we had a major storm, every utility in New England is in the same problem we are in. There's not enough transformers to go around. We would have to do some very creative thinking to get through an issue like that. If we have had a big storm with a lot of transformers on. So we will have to look at, having an impact on our cash reserves to take care of these problems, because you can't stop getting the transformers in, they're needed.
Do any other public utility companies stockpile any of this stuff that we can maybe borrow from them or anything like that?
Everybody's in the same exact boat, Mike. Some people have more than others, but nobody's just willing to give up. And everybody doesn't always run on the same voltage either. I'm gonna be at a meeting with the NEPA contingency on Wednesday. That's the first item on that agenda, is to talk about supply chain. That's how critical it is to the industry.
How many different types of transformers do we have?
So overall, there are probably just within, at a high level between transformers, you have overhead transformers and hanging poles, and then you have underground transformers that are on the ground. So combining all of those together, we probably have about 30 different types when you include primary voltage, secondary voltage, and then size.
So you really can't order too much in advance with that many different.
The bread and butter, we can, absolutely. So your 25 and your 50 kVA transformers, both pad mount and overhead, are the ones that you can definitely stock up in advance, because those are the ones you use most often. Those are also the hardest to get right now. So right now, the lead time on a 25 kVA transformer, whether it's overhead or underground, is 72 weeks.
Where are they made? In the United States?
There's a couple of different areas. The ones right now, we have 3 different vendors that we can go for. One is in Alabama, the other is somewhere in the Midwest. I forget where the third one is.
We got G. Howard and
Not Matrix, something close to Matrix are the 3 primary ones that we use.
So why can't a company like GE ramp up production?
Then, when you talk to the transformer companies, they're having, they are also having supply chain issues, believe it or not. The metals that are required to make these transformers are very hard to come by. And the efficiency ratings on the transformers have only made that more challenging. There's actually, an effort underway now to try to get DOE to reduce the efficiency standards on the transformers. They went up, about 4 or 5 years ago, they upped the efficiency standards, so they're trying to bring it back down.
Okay, thanks. I'm just thinking, isn't this like a national security issue?
Yeah, absolutely.
So is the government involved?
yes,
Yes.
I would think that the government would be all over these guys. I mean, for this kind of a situation, it should never happen. If you
No.
lose the grid in certain places, people are gonna die.
DOE is definitely involved, but in addition to the material shortfalls, the other problem that transformer manufacturers are having is labor. They cannot get the help. So it's kind of they're hit twice.
They cannot get the help, or they don't wanna pay enough to get the help.
That piece I can't, not being part of their company, I can't talk. I just know they.
whatever shows you the price in the transformers, it's the same thing as Barry saying, it's your government stuff. So labor money's coming up, is it just,
Yeah, I mean, is the laborers getting it, or is the company keeping it,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that piece we don't know, but the increase is across the board. All right, first slide, please. So this is our agenda for today. We'll start with a department overview, and then I do want to spend a little time talking about our reliability numbers for the last year, and then from there we'll move into to our budget discussion. All right, so this is an overview of our electric department. Total, we have 27 employees, consisting of electric distribution, that's primarily our linemen, transmission and generation, engineering, and then our control room that actually operates the system. Overall, we are operating and maintaining 461 circuit miles of overhead distribution. So when I talk about circuit miles, that is pole miles. So how many poles we have. Again, for 3-phase construction, typically you actually have 3 wires on each pole. So you can triple that number in some cases in terms of how much wire we actually maintain. Over that, we have 73 circuit miles of underground distribution, 3 substations where we knocked down 115 kV kV to 13.8 for distribution, and then 21,000 electric services. On the generation side of the house, we have a gas turbine generator we'll be retiring in May, and then we also have 3 hydroelectric plants. As part of that, we also maintain 2 dams and 3/4 miles of waterway. All right, so moving on to reliability, this is a bit of a good news story. So you can see here in 2021, this is the data that we have for benchmarking, especially on the IOU side of the house. They're typically about a year time late with their reliability data. So we use the year 2021 for benchmarking, and then I'm showing the year 2022 to just kind of show where our progression is. So you can see in 2021, we were fairly well in line with the Connecticut IOUs. At the end of the day, that's UI and Eversource. And if you remember about 2 years ago when we went through this, I told you that I was seeing a troubling trend where our reliability numbers were going in the wrong direction. That was primarily based on the amount of work that we had to put on hold due to COVID, primarily treatment. So you'll see in the last year and a half, we have stepped up our efforts to try to catch up on some of that time that was lost, and you are now seeing our reliability numbers head in the right direction. So 2022, we performed very well. Any questions? All right. So that said, we always have opportunities for improvement. So every year, once we get the reliability numbers, we then dive into that data and we start looking at individual circuits that may not be performing as well as the system on a whole. Right now, what you can see, circuits 622, 705, 706, and 707. What that is basically North Main Street substation, which covers the area of Greenville, Taffville, up Broad Street all the way up to Washington Street and also feeds NFA. So pretty big area of our city, about 7,000 customers in whole. So that area is definitely an opportunity for improvement. And then the area of Scotland Road is also an area for improvement. And we'll talk about the projects that we have underway to address those issues as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. All right, so right now, we are currently working on North Main Street Substation. This is a project that we had actually started prior to COVID and then had to put on hold when COVID hit. This is primarily feeding the area of Laurel Hill, but ultimately, this will do away with our North Main Street Substation. So if you remember, a couple of years ago, I talked about the North Main Street Substation. That is an 80-year-old substation transformer that we at this point either need to replace, or in the case of this project, we will actually be removing from the system. So this is saving us probably on the order of about $3 million in terms of upgrades that we would have to perform with this substation to keep it intact. And then circuit 704 and 712, that's the river crossing right behind us. We started that project also prior to COVID. This is linked to North Main Street Substation. So wires are already run across the river. All the infrastructure is in place. We just need to finish up our work around North Main Street Substation, and then we can close both of those projects out. Scotland Road, we did a bid just a month ago for this project. The material is now on order, and we are expecting to get it in March. And then we will do an overbuild in Scotland Road from K Street out to Ox Hill and upgrade that whole area to 13.8, which we'll see. What we're building is what's called Hendrix Construction. It's the spacer cable wire that's really close together. You can see it going down North Main Street out here. What that does is kind of twofold. It's tree wire, so it actually can, when trees or branches fall, it can actually resist those trees and keep the lights on. Additionally, it will also, in the case where a tree does come down, typically, instead of breaking the wire, it will actually break a pole. But the good news there is you can float the circuit and be able to replace that pole without the customers ever being shut off. So that is gonna significantly increase the reliability numbers around Scarborough.
So you mentioned the 13.8 upgrade. How does that relate to the grant we are seeking to do the 13.8 connection between all of the substations?
So that is actually 34.5. So
Oh,
that's a higher voltage. And I will talk about that because that's definitely a project that we're going to be kicking off this year.
Yeah, okay.
So Bob, we have 4.8, which is the old stuff. It's not as efficient. You gotta run bigger wire to carry the same current. 13.8, what you see everywhere that's been done in the last 50 years in here. And then 34.5 is the new stuff.
So, Rick, I've been driving by the pole over by, Waurika Street by the, surgery, the endoscopic surgery center.
Yep.
And it's, it's like it's braced up though.
Yes.
So what's taking so much time to fix that? Is there a problem with that? I just wondered.
No, it's, we unfortunately have a couple of poles that are like that throughout the city and we right now are replacing 1 to 2 poles a week. Both poles that have recently failed inspection. We inspect about 500 poles a year, and inevitably, however many of those poles fail. The good news is less of our poles are failing every year as we replace them, but we do have quite a bit of.
I didn't know if you're waiting for an opportune time, maybe because electricity will be off and they don't want to shut the.
No, unfortunately, it's just how many different polls we, that one in particular you're talking about, I believe is on the schedule for 2 weeks from now. But it's on schedule.
There are poles that are owned by Frontier too, right?
What's that? Half
Frontier.
the polls, yep, half the polls are owned by Frontier. I believe the one you're speaking about is ours, and it is on the list to get replaced. But yeah, that's a good point, Bob. Half the polls are owned by them.
That pole was by them, we'd be at their schedule getting it done. But if it fails, we're out there, and if they don't do it in a timely fashion, we will take care of it.
3 or 4 years ago, NPU was putting a pole in front of my house and raised the wires. And they connected a section of the old pole to the new pole because other groups like Frontier had to move, and Xfinity had to move their wires. I would guess it took 1.5 years, maybe 2 years for them to show up to actually move their wires. It was unbelievable.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of that all
Yeah.
over the city. They are, historically, the telecoms are very slow to respond with pole changeovers. We're actually struggling right now with Frontier because they're telling us that they can't get poles. We've even given them our pole vendor because right now, I think we can get poles within 2 to 3 weeks. So we don't really understand the problem they're having.
Well, in fact, don't we at times, like if a car runs into a Frontier pole, we replace the pole and then.
If Frontier won't respond, absolutely. So we give them a certain amount of time and then when they don't get there, we replace it ourselves.
It was pretty good, and it was terrible. Things have improved a little bit, so it's, for a while, we were pretty much replacing everyone because they would just not get there within 5 or 6 hours. And when you're out of power, that's an awful long time to wait. You make sure nobody waits who's out of power. Right.
All right, next slide, please. All right, so for reliability improvements, we're really focusing on 3 areas. The first is replacing or upgrading our aging infrastructure. For this coming year, we're going to be focusing on our relays and controls. The first being 10th Street Substation. Those relay upgrades are going to match what we've done already at Bean Hill and Dudley Street. So if you look down in the picture on the lower right, that is a picture of bus 1 out of Bean Hill Substation. What you can see there are all our electronic relays. It doesn't look like much, but that's actually a good thing. What that replaced is on each one of those panels, there were about 18 different relays that controlled each distribution circuit. We've ripped all that out of there and replaced it with a tiny little blue box, significantly reducing maintenance costs and giving us far better remote control over our distribution circuits. So that upgrade there, we'll be doing out at 10th Street Substation. Again, that's a project that we had scheduled for 2 years ago and has been pushed out. So that is now on the plan for this coming year. And then our hydro relays and controls. So Our hydros right now, the control system out there is 1950s technology. So our plan is to replace all the relays and controls out there and bring them up to today's standards. Circuit upgrades, we talked about 705, 706, and 707 earlier. Again, that's primarily the area around North Main Street. Feeds out to Greenville, Tapville, and then even all the way out to NFA. So that is on tap for this year, this coming year as well. On the preventative maintenance side, tree trimming continues to be one of our biggest drivers. We'll get to numbers in the coming slides. Pole replacements, like we just talked about, and Greenville dam maintenance is another big driver. And then as we prepare for future growth, that brings us to the 34.5 ring bus design. This year, we'll be putting some money towards the engineering effort to get that project underway. Next slide, please. All right, so this is just a summary of the electric budget overall. On the O&M side, you can see an increase from FY23 to FY24. Again, that's primarily driven on the O&M side. That's primarily driven by dam maintenance and tree trimming, like we talked about. On the capital side, you're seeing what looks like a pretty significant increase between FY23 and FY24, but you can see in the bullet down below, it's a bit of a misnomer. We actually had to under budget in FY23 due to capacity constraints that we had on the system. If you go back to FY22, the budget was actually 1.5 million, and overall on our 10-year capital plan, we typically target about 2 million a year to spend. So while it looks like a very high number, that's actually in line with what we plan for our annual spend. Next slide, please. All right, so our expense drivers, like I talked about, distribution maintenance, 1.9 million overall. Big piece of that, close to 600,000 is tree trimming. That is a significant amount of our effort, but you can see through our reliability numbers that we talked earlier, we are seeing the gains in that tree trimming. Generation maintenance, the dam and the canal totals about $300,000 a year, $300,000 for this coming year. That picture down in the lower right is the dam maintenance that we just completed. You can see what you're looking at there is the lowest portion, we call it the lower apron of the dam, where we took out about 200 feet of that dam and completely replaced it, all the way from the timbers to the ballast and on out. So that it is a significant undertaking to maintain that dam, but we made some really good inroads this year, and we want to keep that going in the coming years. Transmission maintenance overall, it's about 200,000. That's primarily regulatory driven. A lot of required maintenance that we have to report on an annual basis. And then training to make sure that we are maintaining our regulatory compliance, both with NERC and OSHA. There is a pretty significant spend there, about 71,000. But again, that's to make sure that all of our employees are meeting our regulatory requirements.
And we have a lot of new employees too. So we've had a rather large turnover of the electric department. And so new employees need more training.
That's a good point, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, there are 4 linemen that are going through one.
Ourselves responsible for training all people.
Yes. So moving on to the capital side of the house, we have our recurring capital up top. The biggest driver there is transformers. Like we talked about earlier, that overall we have seen a 5 times increase on transformers. So a pad mount 25 kVA transformer, again, that's our bread and butter. That's a 1 to 2 customers that feeds. That was $2,000 only 3 years ago. It is now $10,000 for a single transformer. So massive increases that we're seeing on the transformer side of the house, and that's reflected there. The budget for last year on transformers was $300,000, and this year it's $702,000.
Just a quick question. There's been a lot of news stories, and apparently it's not common to happen to every system, but I mean, a lot of cases where people who taken shots at transformers and disabled them. What do we do to A, protect ourselves against that, and B, have a emergency response to it?
So Bob, we're gonna have a full presentation on that in the next board meeting, and that'll be an exec session.
Okay.
So, we do a lot of really good things, and we have some systems in place that even the other beauties don't have, as far as a 24/7 control room and, people actively looking at cameras. A lot of that stuff will come out, and we'll have a good
Okay.
discussion in a couple of weeks.
All right, and then for upgrades, this is stuff that we covered earlier in the presentation, but the big targets this year for investment, circuit 705, 706, and 707, like we talked about, starting the engineering for the 34.5 ring, 10th Street substation, the hydro controls, and the only one that I didn't mention earlier was the Bean Hill power line carrier. So well, power line carrier, this is actually how we talk to other substations. This is how the transmission system operates. So this is how Bean Hill substation tells Montville substation that we have a problem somewhere on that line, and that they have to communicate back and forth. So this is actually a joint project that we do with Eversource, because Eversource owns Montville. And you'll see down in the lower right there, that is actually a shot of the bus work out at Bean Hill substation. So we have that on plan for this company.
And then as far as the 34.5 goes, designed heavy this year, putting in for grants in numerous places. If the grants don't come through, we'll be looking at bonding or other things to get that expedited, so it's not a 20-year or a 10+ year project. We're going to try to see if we can shrink that down significantly. So first, let's see the avenues that are open now. If they close up, we go on a different path.
All right, and finally, I talked about the $2 million a year that we have budgeted through our 10-year capital plan, which meets our 10-year strategic plan. And we focus in 3 primary areas. The first, to address distributed generation. That's the 34.5 ring bus that we've talked about. While we talk about it in the area of distributed generation, this is also a means to back up our existing substations. So it's both hardening our infrastructure and getting ready for what's coming, and what we believe to be small distributed generation. Next is eliminating our 408 infrastructure. Again, this is the oldest infrastructure that we have in the city. Most of it is on the order of somewhere between 50 and 80 years old. So it is inefficient. Most utilities at this point are completely phasing it out, and we're doing the same thing. So our goal is to eliminate that infrastructure. And then last is leveraging new technology. Overall, that is maintenance planning, outage management, and SCADA. And overall, that's going to help us reduce our maintenance costs, improve cybersecurity, and increase reliability. Any questions? I should have pointed out the picture down in the lower right is actually a picture of that 34.5 ring. That's essentially, we're building a ring all the way around the city. And all the little areas that you see in red are all the distributed generation that we have already on our system that we'd be looking together. And then obviously the idea is that we expect that to expand in the coming years.
It's not final yet. There's talk at CMAC about CMAC doing some battery developments in the various communities, CMAC communities. And I don't know how ready or unready we are for that, but and I also don't know if it would be backup power for the grid, or it would be usable by the community. And well, we just, and in particular, I think, I could be wrong, but I think currently the jet provides backup for the community, not for the grid. That could be wrong, I don't know. But in any instance, we're gonna have to phase out the jet, and it would be good to have some backup for the community to replace it.
Yeah. So when it comes to the jet going away, that gives us that 10+ megawatts of capacity. 50 is what the jet puts on, but 15 is the stress in this area.
Yep.
So it's probably in this area here, as soon as the jet goes away in the spring, 10 megawatts could be put somewhere in this area to compensate for that.
Okay.
The jet does not have black start capability. It did it one time before, more than 25 years ago. So the jet is not something that can back up power in Norwich.
Okay,
It can only go on the ISO grid.
okay.
And then when we look at using battery storage as a microgrid, maybe you could talk a little bit about.
Yeah, absolutely. We stay in really close, touch with CMEC on this. So the 34.5 ring, when we talk about that distributed generation, batteries are a big piece of that. And that incorporates, CMEC's project. So we do talk quite a bit, and CMEC knows that getting this, ring bus in place is going to support them being able to move forward with some of those battery projects. Now I lost my train of thought.
Oh, so if you put batteries in, can it be used to power which still, but once again, it's that black start microgrid.
Absolutely. So part of the 34.5 ring bus, the grant application that we're going for right now is also for microgrid technology in order to island the city and run off grid, so to speak. There's additional technology that we need to make sure that we're maintaining system voltage, system frequency, things like that we would typically be able to use the grid to get. But that is part of the grant that we're going for.
I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, Michael in particular has brought up multiple times his concern that, you know, we're significantly reliant on the grid, and if the grid goes down,
100%.
we're out of power. But I don't know if there's an answer to that. I mean, I think the grid is,
It's a start.
Yeah.
Batteries on a 34.5 is a start.
That's a great thing.
Yes.
That's very good. Very
It's not
good.
gonna last forever.
no,
I mean, it's like running the radio to your car, right? You can't start the car eventually. Your battery
Yeah.
keeps you going.
I mean, it's been a while when Manhattan had the grid go down and they had the blackout, you know, in Manhattan, that was, you know, rather traumatic event. We were lucky, we were more lucky than good, on that, which is our proximity to Millstone saved us.
I know some people that were in New York City when it happened. It was real scary. So it sounds like you guys have tremendous game plans and you have objectives that are good objectives. You know, you're doing the best you can under difficult circumstances, supply, supply issues. The thing that bothers me a little bit here is I don't think the public has any awareness that if there was like a major problem, we might not be able to get up and running right away.
Major problem is gonna be regional, not local, and it's gonna be national news, not even local news. So, that, and everybody's kind of the same boat. If we lose the grid,
But I don't think people are aware of it. I could be wrong. I mean, I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware that the grid could go down just because it's a transformer shortage, you know? I wasn't aware of that.
well, the transformers is gonna be more local issues. And if we don't have, you know, Eric says, you know, 25s are bread and butter, you can throw a 50, you can throw a larger one. Inefficient, harder to do, you can get by. It gets to a point where if we had that major ice storm that took out 1,000 transformers in a swath of New England, everybody's in the same boat, and it's really, you know, we will find ways of band-aiding to get there, but it's not gonna be easy, and it's not gonna be.
Well, maybe it's not our job to publicize it. Maybe it's Nevin's job. I mean, it's gotta really be pushed. I mean, if you don't make any waves, nothing's gonna happen. You gotta put people's feet to the fire. You know, you got senators and congressmen, they're always bragging about everything they do. So if you bring up this problem, you say, you know, the legislature, you know, needs to address this, or the, you know, the Transportation Department of the United States, or wherever the hell it is, you know, we need to put some pressure on them.
But I sympathize with you, but I think, I don't think we're gonna go back to the old days where Norwich and other communities all generated essentially all of their power. It's just not efficient. And I don't know what the answer is, but, I mean, first of all, the grid power doesn't come in just from one place. I mean, there are multiple generating sources and multiple distribution facilities, wiring that can get power here if need be.
I
I mean, we're
wasn't
connected
talking,
to Canada, we're connected to New York.
I wasn't talking
New
about
York's connected
generating
to
power, I
Midwest.
was talking about transmitting power to everybody off of the grid. Or
Yeah.
whatever's available. I mean, I understand, we're not ready to be an island yet, but
But when you look at nationally, or let's go internationally first. What's Russia doing to try to win the war in Ukraine? They're cutting off utilities. They're aiming at those life essential substations and things. That's, how many of the transformers in the world are going over there even?
that's probably part of the
That might be part of the shortage.
Yeah,
But all our trade associations are working hard to push Congress to help in these areas and get things moving faster. But, these militia groups are targeting substations. You read that in the
in the
newspaper.
United States.
We'll talk about that more in that exec session. But it is, until we get to the point where we're all generating power in our own home from wind, solar, whatever, it's gonna, a large regional infrastructure is very hard to defend.
Okay, so how can you be an island in your own home? You can get solar panels and a battery, I suppose, is that the way they do it now?
And, well, 34.5 helps us immensely. That's that redundancy of multiple substations. If we have an issue with anyone, once again, we'll talk about that in the exec session. So we can talk more freely about all the assets and all the things we're doing and what's going on in the world.
It's very good, knows I'm putting heat exchangers in my house. And we're working with a contractor on that. I was thinking of going, don't throw any rocks at me, but I was thinking of going with solar on top of that battery, just for that reason that, if something goes down, you can keep operating. Here,
No, there's no rocks being thrown for anybody doing that, Mike. But what we're doing is not subsidizing it, like in a mass community. So if you will get a payback, it's just gonna be a longer time frame. And you do also get that peace of mind, this is,
I'm not really worried about the payback as much as the idea that, you're lowering your carbon footprint and helping take pressure off the grid and this and that. Those kinds of considerations.
And as we go, more electrification, your house, if you want to put a backup generator on it, generator has to be significantly bigger. If you're heating, if you have oil or if you have natural gas, you don't need a lot of power to generate, to run a furnace. But if your electric's your only source of fuel for your batteries of your car or for, your heat and cooling, that's a lot more usage. So bigger generators, bigger backups needed.
We're keeping our NPU gas market, heating system. So even though we're going to have, the heat exchanger, it's going to be a redundancy source there. I guess there's going to be controls, as Mary Lou explains, where the temperature gets cold and we can decide when that is, that we can kick over to the propane from the heat exchangers. And so in that case, it sounds like it's feasible to, just get away from the heat exchangers in case of some sort of an outage, just use the propane, which might still be coming through.
Yeah.
Can this place run if the grid goes down?
We have generators here. Yeah.
So you could still get natural gas. That wouldn't stop even if there was a national outage.
There's redundancies on the gas systems is usually at least 2 lines and 2 sets of compressors for each one. Don't know if there was something really big, what would happen.
Interestingly enough, the compressors used to be powered by natural gas turbines. Now they're going to electric. So if the grid did fail, they might not be able to generate the pressure.
Yeah, it's all because of cost footprint, they're doing that. They're agreed power pipeline.
Essentially.
But less reliable.
Yes, well, they don't control their own reliability, essentially, we use trusting somebody else for the electricity to come in.
I would never go that way if it was up to me. That's me. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very interesting. Well, I think we beat it up pretty good.
Yeah, and I hope one thing you get out of this is reliability is coming back and it's better than ever. How about that?
Yeah.
Because, we did take a little bit during COVID.
When you say reliability is coming back, it's better than ever. I think it worked for it, I just don't know why.
Well, that was the reliability numbers that Eric showed that were better than we were last year and better than all of the surrounding IOUs, restaurants.
Okay,
So,
well, I understand that Hughes is the most reliable utility around. I mean, you pretty much know that. But I don't know why it's gonna get better from now to the future.
we were always, always trying to get better. We lost a little ground, we lost some reliability. Now we've got the trend going back down again, and we are in
What
really
were
good
the
shape.
causes of losing reliability? Was we couldn't afford to trim trees or something?
You tree trimming and maintenance of the system,
Why couldn't we do it?
because we had to save $9 million in cash to survive COVID. When the restaurants, our largest gas customer, our largest electric customer, all stopped using our power.
I understand it. That was the means to get through.
Had to get through.
Yeah.
Don't play both for that one.
Well, that's very interesting. Thank you. So we ready to move on to the annual audit report? Good.
I distributed the hard copy of the report. You'll also get it electronically with the board package that's coming up. Items having the greatest impact on the financials during fiscal 22 were the increased cost of energy, which we've discussed several times, the pension obligation bonds, and the implementation of GASB 87. Cash balance decreased by just under $4 million in fiscal 22 from 21. A significant factor in this is the over $8 million increase in the cost of energy from the prior year. And the recovery of those costs, as we've put in play for the PPA and the PGA, was over a 2-year window. So we're recovering the costs longer than the period in which we incurred the expense. The NPU portion of the pension obligation bonds was just under 53 million. So that's the NPU piece of the total debt. Use of those funds increased the portion that was funded from 66% in June of 2021 to 88% as of June of 2022. And the GASB 87 change, that is the change for accounting for what would have previously been defined as operating leases. Prior to this change, you would see those sort of activities on the income statement. They would be expensed every month. Now with the new accounting rules, we now have new assets related to leases and new liabilities related to leases that are on the balance sheet. The intention of this is to have a better picture of your long-term lease obligations so that you can see what the liabilities or future liabilities of an organization are. And the partner from CLA, Ron Nosek, will be here on February 28th at the board meeting to give an overview of the audit. So if you do have any questions, you do have the financials to review before the board meeting.
That's the next meeting?
Yes, the end of this month. Yep, so give everybody an opportunity to review.
Well, I was just looking at the litigation real quick, 14 under the sewer, under below the combined sewer overflows. Is that litigation by the state against utilities or private litigation?
That's a different note. That litigation has nothing to do with sewer overflows. The note is specific to litigation at any point in time. Somebody's suing us for something, and it's just a general note about that, not specifically to sewer. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We listen.
Yeah, our major lawsuits have been settled. We have a few minor
Yeah.
ones hanging around. Nothing of major concern.
I just thought maybe it was related.
And nothing related to the sewer, no.
List the transfer to the city of $8.6 million roughly.
In fiscal 22, yes.
Yes, that's because we look back to the completed fiscal year to calculate that, right?
So
So for 2023, it should go up dramatically, is that
So
right?
23 is based on the 21 numbers, and I do believe that that was a little bit
Oh.
lower. I'd have to go back and look at that. What we're doing right now is budget 24. It's based on the 22 numbers.
Okay,
So there is that 1 year lag,
yeah,
and budget 24 is higher. And I'll have that in the presentation when we go over the budget, along with the 10-year chart that I always provide, so we can see the trend as to where we are for the last decade.
But this will be the last of the COVID years.
This is, yes, so 2024 budget is fiscal 22, as we started to see more normal revenues and function. Although I think that it's probably better defined as a new normal, because we're seeing things come back in a different way.
I mean, when you say 2024,
Mhm.
it's 2023 dash 2024, right? The
No,
next decade.
Yes, so July of 23
Yeah, yeah,
to fiscal 24. Typically always use the year end date.
yeah, no, I understand,
Yep.
I'm easily confused.
No, fiscal year always messes people up because it starts in one year and ends to the other. So this will be the budget year that starts this July coming up and ends next June.
Okay,
Right now, I'm in the middle of 3 years. I just finished 22, we're running 23, and I'm building 24. So I'm not quite sure what year it is myself.
So, Mike, our next meeting is gonna be on the 21st, which is the day after, President's Day. A week from Tuesday, week tomorrow.
I have that in my schedule.
Yep, we have, water and sewer budget with Larry. Then we have all of the other administrative services, customer service, IT, GIS, finance, purchasing. Who else did I? Well, efficiency, who else did I miss?
We'll have the board budget in that
Yeah.
and marketing and communications. I think we've hit, and then just a standard G&A where you talk about staffing, benefits, insurance, that type of thing.
So there'll be a few more parties speaking at the next one, and it'll be, once again, that'll kind of wrap up higher level discussions. And then in the March meeting, we'll have the full budget layout for one.
Okay, so that's on the 21st is the next meeting?
Next week from Tuesday, 1 o'clock.
Just go to this, make sure I got it in here. I'm having trouble syncing this with my office one. I know it's in my office one, but I got it. Yeah, it didn't get in here, okay. Okay, that's Tuesday, February 21, right?
Yeah,
Or
1 p.m.
Let's go to the one. Okay. Three, and
And after digesting this material, you have any questions on either gas or electric, we can also answer those, or if you get into us in advance, we can write something to the whole board, and then we'll be able to present the rest of the budget that's coming in.
I mean, I'm not an expert on, just, what's the right word, how the facilities work.
The operations.
Operations work. I mean, it's beyond me. I trust you guys. It sounds like you're doing what you're supposed to do, and it's great, but other than the fact that we got this situation, supply chain, on stuff we need, then what do we do when we can't get parts and pieces? And Eric was saying we can substitute some things for other things to get by. But, it's not the ideal situation.
But we do have contingency plans in place, so not ideal, but we do have plans. in
We do
place.
have contingency.
And I think just to keep it all in perspective, I mean, one of the reasons this exists is because the federal government directly and through the state have made an incredible amount of infrastructure money available. And it's driving up prices and it's driving up availability. And so at the end of the day, we're better off with a lot of extra money and the trouble of getting parts than not having any money at all.
Internal, when we started seeing this problem, we created a task force. Tom went, and started meeting with all the integrity managers. We all got together, found, trying to find alternate solutions to getting things that we normally do. So,
Chris, just to clarify, the transformers were an issue before the infrastructure money and before the pandemic. It's just pandemic has exacerbated it.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
what was a long lead time became a possible lead time.
It's a story of American industry over the last 20 or 30 years. That's really what it is.
Well, I thank everybody for their input. Is there anything else, Chris, that you need to go over to?
Nothing for us.
Well, thank you again.
It's gonna be a busy couple of weeks. We got a meeting on the 21st and a meeting on the 28th, so,
It's a busy time for me right now, too.
tax season.
Oh, my God. I get going on that stuff and I'm in another world, you know.
All right.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn. If you'd like.
Oh, yeah, motion, somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make one.
I'll second it.